the public library and the city archive in Leuven. So we'll immediately start. I'm going to the presentation. Okay, and there it is. So we're talking about the conversion and the renovation of this former Henry Vandevelde school building. And what you can expect in this lecture is first some explanation about the identity, the typical characteristics of this school building. Then I'll shortly tell you something about Henry Vandevelde for those who don't know him, but this will probably won't be necessary, but still some slides about him. Then there is a short story of the school, but there are so many stories about this school. And then there is the main part of the lecture, namely the part about the conversion and the renovation. There were two renovations, in fact. The most important one was in 1997, so the beginning of this new century. And then 3 years ago, we had a second renovation, which mainly took place in the library, but also had an impact on the whole building. And then I'll talk about built heritage and audience engagement and about Leuven Public Library. Okay, ready to start. A remarkable front wall. This is not the front wall, in fact, this is the back door for the pupils of the Stedelijke Technische School. So an impressive, large building, very rational with lots of lines. So you immediately notice that the line is important to Henry Vandevelde. To situate the school building, some information. I'm not an architect. I study languages and literature, but I have a big passion for architecture. But I discuss this building as a user, not as an architect. But still some information. The floor plan there of the ground plan. As you notice, you have a kind of square here, which was the playground. And this building was built on a site of a former convent. So in the middle of the city, in between two streets. So there was a street here. Well, there still is a street here. And this is what you just saw, the facade you just saw on the previous picture. And then on this side, there's also a street, a shopping street, with a very small facade here, a very narrow facade. The plan you see here is the floor plan of the first floor, because I also added this section to show you that there is a difference in level between the two streets and the two entrances. So this is the entrance at the Rijschoolstraat, and this is the entrance at the Diessestraat. And you notice there is one layer in height difference. When you look at the size of the building, it counts 6,500 square meters, and the Leuven Library, the Bib Leuven, takes over 4,000 square meters, so it's the most important resident of the building, in fact. There are three floors, as you notice here, and two entrances, the one at the Rijschoolstraat and the one here in the shopping street, the Diessestraat. And as you notice, you have the square form. You recognize the square form of the former convent in the site and in the plan that Vandevelde designed for the school. The school is built heritage since 2010, so not so long yet. But it was already protected, the two facades here in the Rijschoolstraat, the one I showed you, and here the one in the Diessestraat, which I will show you in a few minutes. They were protected in 1999. Here you see the other entrance, the one at the Diessestraat, which is very small and you hardly notice it. So when you're in the shopping street of Leuven, you just pass it by and you don't realize that behind this very small building, there is an enormous other building with a square and enormous spaces that can be used and that are very light and clear to live in and to work in. But we were talking about the history, the identity of the school. So you had the assignment to build a technical school to Henry Vandevelde in 1936. It was meant to be a school for boys, and it was not a grammar school at all. It was a technical and vocational school where boys learned how to plumb, to repair cars, to do some woodwork, and so on. Henry Vandevelde was already older at the moment. He was already in his 70s, and he was supported by a local architect, Vital Rossels, who took over coordination of the building, while Henry Vandevelde was the one who designed all the plans and even the furniture. And remarkable is the facade with the orange ceramic tiles, which were French. And it's not so remarkable when you look at another building that Vandevelde designed in that period, namely the Belgian Pavilion for the World Exhibition in Paris in 1936. And there you recognize immediately completely the same ceramic tiles. When you look at the building here, you immediately realize it's a very rigid, transparent, rational structure. All these windows, lots of glass, very transparent. Clarity and system is important for Vandevelde. So he says the line is everything. You don't only have a lot of glass and windows, but you also have patios inside to get the light into the building. So you have the large courtyard, the playground for the children, but inside the building there were 3 or 4 patios to get light into the different classrooms and corridors. Very specific and very special were the removable glass walls. I say glass walls, but in fact these were kind of metal panels that were glazed. And the city council was very worried at first because they thought, will there be headstands and so on, and what will happen to this, and is this important, and so on. But they gave the permission, and Henry Vandevelde used these glass walls to limit classrooms and to define them, in fact. The typical materials were concrete, which was very modern at the moment, steel, glass, and then the ceramic tiles. And you had also a very typical 30s color palette with terracotta, soft yellow, mint green. And like in his other works, Vandevelde thought building is kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, where he also designed the furniture. He made plans for chairs, tables, paper baskets, and so on. And they were all to be found in the city archive in Leuven still now, and there we could check them. And another remarkable element for this building is that it was the last Vandevelde designed building in Belgium. A quote by Vandevelde: "The line is a force whose activities are like those of all natural elemental forces. The line takes its strength from the energy of the one who drew it." So the line is really everything for Vandevelde. And this is also clear, I think, when you watch the building. Some pictures to give you an impression of the style. And then second element, Henry Vandevelde. I suppose you all know him, but just some information might also be interesting. You notice Vandevelde here when he's younger, of his plans and drawing table, and here when he's older. So I already told you he was already 74 when he drew the plans for the technical school in Leuven. So he was rather old, but still very creative. And then when we look at his life, Vandevelde, in fact, wasn't an architect to start. He was a painter. And recently there was an edition of a book that was published about his paintings, which you see here the cover of. But there was one turning point, I say, in his life. He was a painter, and he saw the paintings made by Van Gogh at a certain moment, together with his wife in Amsterdam. And he was so astonished and impressed that he said, I can't be a painter anymore. I have to do something else because I can't get better than this. And the story goes that that was a turning point in his life, and he became an architect. But in reality, in fact, Vandevelde thought that painting was something very exclusive. Who could afford to have paintings made? This was art for the upper class. And Vandevelde thought beauty was important for everybody in the daily life of every person. And that's why he turned to architecture. Vandevelde first, when he started as an architect, he became well known in the beginning of the previous century for his Art Nouveau buildings. You see here a picture of his own villa in Uccle, which is still very much a building in cottage style, and which is very different from the later modernist buildings he made. But he started, in fact, as an Art Nouveau architect, and he was together with Horta and Ancard, one of the three important and famous Art Nouveau architects in Belgium. In fact, Horta and Vandevelde weren't good friends. They were constantly quarreling about who was the first Art Nouveau architect in Belgium, but that's another story. He was also sympathizing with the arts and crafts movement, like many Art Nouveau architects, the importance of nature and the importance of craftsmanship. Important to him. Later on, he went, so let's say 1910, he went to Weimar in Germany, where he was the first one who created the arts and crafts school, the Kunstgewerbeschule, where people could learn how to do some woodwork, to create tiles, to paint. They had theoretical art courses, but especially many practical art courses, and they also had they learned craftsmanship there. In 1919, after the war, Vandevelde had to go back to Belgium because the fact that he had lived in Germany made him a suspect, and he was not loved in Belgium at all for that. So he had to return to Belgium. Also, in Germany, they couldn't stand him anymore because Germany had lost the war. So they didn't want any foreigner anymore being the president of an important architecture school and craft school there. So Walter Gropius took it over, and the school became, in fact, the basis for Bauhaus. So Vandevelde was the one who initiated, in fact, Bauhaus in Germany. He went on to the Netherlands, to Belgium. He became a professor at the University of Ghent, La Cambre in Brussels, and he was changing in his architectural opinions and plans. He stressed more the line, the sober, the simple, the rational line, modern materials, rigid lines. And in this way, he designed lots of buildings, one of which is the most famous, the Boektoren in Ghent, the library of the University of Ghent, which is now just restored and which you can visit again. They say he had something for libraries because already in Weimar in Germany he designed the library of the Nietzsche archive in Ghent and the Boektoren. He designed a library for a baroness in Brussels. He was part of the commission who had a look at the plans for the Royal Library in Brussels. And a small detail, The Belgian Pavilion he designed for the World Exhibition in New York in 1939, moved later on to Virginia Union University in Richmond, where it also became a library. So it's not strange at all that the formal school building in Leuven also became a library. Let's go over to the story of the school then. It started in 1936, as I already mentioned, where the plans and the assignment was given to Harry Vandevelde and to Vital Rosales. You see here some pictures with on the right-hand side a typical color palette. You have the soft yellow, the green, the terracotta, and you also see these special removable walls in metal with glass to make the whole room more transparent. And it was also very functional, because some of these walls could slide or could be taken away to enlarge the room and to make the space multifunctional, which is really spectacular and very future-proof, in fact. We realized later on. Here you see some of the students in the building. When you look at these lamps at that moment they were very modern. Now they are still modern. They are real expensive vintage lamps. And you notice that in the school you didn't only have classrooms, but also larger workplaces where larger machines were situated and where people and students could work. Yes, we're talking about the history of the school. So 1936, the school, 1940, the war. In 1942, they opened the school. So it's exactly 80 years ago this year. And it first was a city school. Later on, it became a state school called Rito. But there were so many students that the school didn't have enough room anymore at the Vandevelde building, and they moved in 1983 to another school campus at the outskirts of the city of Leuven. And you notice here what happens when a building isn't used anymore. I don't have to tell you what happens. So you see here the courtyards, the playground, the former playground. You have a good view on the rhythm and the lines of the glass windows. And yes, decay, a problem. It became kind of city council. But in 1993, there were protests. There was a protest movement. There was also international protest. And there were plans to reconstruct and reconvert the school. George Baines was the architect who got the assignment and who made plans. But before there was a renovation, there was still this very famous recording of a choreography by Anne-Theresa de Keersmaker, Rosa's Dans Rosas. And the empty school served as a kind of film set, and that's why we still have these very beautiful images of the glazed walls there. These were the ones that could slide away with the dancers in front of it. And you also notice the terracotta floor, the yellow color, and here also you notice the floor tiles. Yes, the film became famous. Not only the film, also the choreography became famous in 2013 when Beyoncé copied the whole choreography and the industrial surroundings in which it was filmed for a song countdown. You can still find it on YouTube. You just Google it, and you should look at it because it was a real copy. Later on, Beyoncé changed the choreography because it was clear that, well, she was just a copycat, in fact, if I'm allowed to say so. In 1997, then the renovation started, and then the building got a new function. It became public library and city archive. In 2000, it opened, and then in 2019 and 2022, there was a second renovation. Here you see the library as it opened in 2000, with you still see the ventilation conducts and the cable gutters, so the techniques were still visible, as was the case in the original technical school. And here you see some picture of the archive, which was also housing in the former technical school. So that was it for history. And then the main part, the story about the renovation and the conversion. So you've heard some general outlines, and now more in detail. So the first renovation went on in 1997, as I already told you, till 2000. And in fact, it was not a renovation, it was a reconstruction. They stuck to the modernist look and feel. You see the techniques were still visible, the ventilation ducts, the lights and so on, the cable gutters. They stuck also to the color palette, so the soft yellow. The ceramic tiles were reproduced. And apart from the soft green, the terracotta, and soft yellow, another color was added, the gray, which you see here. The windows and so on were gray because in this way Baines wanted to indicate what was new in the building. Everything which was new was gray, to make it clear. Still, they were able to recover some original elements, like the original entrance door, and they also stuck to the original, no, not the original pillars, to the principle of the pillars, but they weren't the original pillars, because I already told you the building was constructed in the war, so starting from 1939 till 1938, in fact, till 1942, and when they wanted to start a renovation, they saw the concrete was of very bad quality, all the materials, in fact. So they couldn't use it again, or they couldn't even restore it. They had to reconstruct it. So what Baines did was he looked carefully at the original plans, which were in Leuven, and he tried to reconstruct the building in a very detailed way, in the way the original plans showed. But of course, the new function was a library, which means you have shelves and shelves with thousands of books, which means an enormous weight. So the basic concrete frame construction was not sturdy, not firm enough, so they had to reconstruct it. And furthermore, something which was really a pity was that they had to take away all these removable sliding walls, because they wanted to create an open structure to put all these library shelves. There was a lot of protest against it, but to give the building a new function, this was necessary. What is a pity is that these very special walls disappeared. Nobody knows where they are. So it's a story of many renovations, and many Art Nouveau and also modernist buildings. Essential original pieces just disappeared, were sold, were destroyed. Nobody knows. George Baines also designed some new furniture, as you notice here. Some wardrobes in the same style. Baines was a fan of Le Corbusier, so also very rigid, sober, functional, rational lines. Then you have the additions. So I already told you we had an open structure instead of the different small classrooms, but there were also some extra buildings added. I say extra buildings, but it's not in fact extra buildings. There were extra spaces added, like this Vandevelde cafe where people could drink. So they wanted to reinforce the social function and the cultural function of the building. So there became kind of, there was a kind of cafe Vandevelde, where they added the extra parallel wall here to the building. This was the original wall, but they enlarged it with an extra glazed wall, in fact, where you had then space for a cafe where people could sit. And in the summer, here in the playground of the school, the former playground, they could have a terrace and children could play outside. The patios, which were in the building to draw some light till in the inner building, some of them were roofed, so that in this case, or in this way, we could also gain some extra space to put, for example, in our case of the library, the tables where now people are reading the newspapers. You also notice some wooden structures, like here, the famous staircase in the library itself, and a similar one, a twin staircase in the cafe. In the library, you had also a raised platform at the info desk. And in this way, Baines wanted to compensate and to soften the industrial and metal, glass, concrete look of the building and to make it a bit more cozy with the warm wood. And I already mentioned that the gray color was added. Also here you notice everything that is added is gray. We were talking about a new structure, but of course there was a new program which had an enormous impact on the structure too. I already told you an open structure was needed, and the glazed walls disappeared, removable walls. But the new program and function was not something bad. It was well chosen, in fact, because it fitted with the original function of the site, the historical function of the site. It was a convent, and it's a place where the sisters or the nuns educated young girls. It was an educational and a cultural hub, in fact. And by installing the public library and the city archive at that location, at the same hub, you stuck, in fact, or you honored, in fact, the historical function of the site. Apart from a cultural function and a meeting point, became the building also a passage in the city. I already told you it is situated very centrally in the shopping street between the shopping streets of Leuven, and the building became a corridor, in fact, a passage from the higher part of the city to the lower city. When I showed you some time ago the section, you already saw the difference in level, and people can use the building as a passage, as a shortcut to go to the higher or the lower part of the city. And meanwhile, they see this courtyard, which is still very much a concrete courtyard, but we hope, we have future plans to make it greener and to make it a kind of green oasis where people can relax. Here you see the Café Vandevelde and the modern wall that's put against the formal school building and the formal original wall parallel to it. Interesting is also that there was a new name needed for the building. It was not a school anymore, so we couldn't call it the Stedelijke Technische School anymore. and they chose for the name Tweebronnen, which means two sources. And there's also a small story to this name, because in fact, Tweebronnen was the name of a house in the 16th century, a house very close to the convent at that time. It was the house of the humanist Juan Luis Vives. He was a professor at the Leuven University, and he was teaching Latin and Greek. And his house was called Tweebronnen. And it was called that way because in the garden there were two sources. And he used the image of the two sources as a metaphor in his lessons. And he said Latin and Greek were the two sources of knowledge and wisdom. And so they took this name, Tweebronnen, two sources, as a name for this building. And in 2000, they said the two sources are the library and the archive, because they are the two sources of knowledge and wisdom. Yes, I have a video that was made when we were 5 years in this building. To celebrate it, but I'm not going to show it because it takes maybe too much time. But later on, if you want to, you can rewatch it, and we just go on with the renovation. The second renovation then. Yeah, renovation. Which renovation? When you start a renovation, you also ask yourself, well, you start at one place, and at the end, you've covered the whole building, in fact. And this was also the case in 2019. In fact, the floor needed to be repaired, needed to be replaced because it was worn out after more than 15 years of use. So, you know, there are let's say 8,000 people a week who come in the library. So it was really necessary to replace the floor. But of course, you start with the floor, and then in the floor, there are the electric cables, there are the IT cables. So the technical department of Leuven said, well, wait a minute, when you are going to replace the floor, we want to do some changes too. We want to use new cables. We want to replace some things. We want to modernize. And that's what happened. So there was a complex renovation with different parts of the building that had to be mended and repaired. And it started with IT and electricity, the floor. And then, of course, we had lots of lights here, which you still see where we hung the lights. But these were the original lights, which cost too much energy. So why not choose for LED lighting? Okay, we had some subsidies, and there was a relighting plan. But of course, when you had all these works here, the walls had to be repainted. And while we had moved away all the shelves and all the books, we were redesigning the way we were working and the way the shelves were put in the space. We wanted more open space, more space for people instead of space for shelves. So there was a reorganization of the open spaces. We needed new furniture. And after all these changes, we also needed to adapt to wayfinding because things had changed. You found departments at other places. So this was also something which is on the list. So the second renovation seemed to be at first a very small one. Only the floor would be changed, but later on it became a whole list of changes, which is often the case with the renovation. Then some more information about the principles. We thought it would be, well, the building where we work is such a very pleasant, comfortable building with so much light that we really respect Vandevelde and the way he constructed and designed his building so many years ago. So together with the city archive, which is located in our building, so we are partners, we had a look at the original plans and they were studied, and just like George Baines, our architect had a look at it and tried to understand the vision of Vandevelde and to respect this vision. So the respect for the built heritage was very important to us. Then of course, when you're living in an old building, customer comfort is really important if you want that you have visitors to come to you, because when they don't like it, it's not comfortable, well, they don't come anymore. So customer comfort was important, and we tried to be innovative and to use modern techniques to make this possible. Then you had also the environmental sustainability. We wanted to be the building climate friendly. And we have also the principle of the social sustainability. And each of these principles I'm going to explain now. First, the respect for heritage in the second renovation. You notice here the ground plan, the floor plan, sorry, of the second level. As you notice here, you had the large front wall, the large facade I showed you completely at the beginning of the presentation. And here you have the small facade I showed you also some slides ago. And here you have the inner courtyard. You notice there is here a patio, there is a patio. Here was also a patio, which is covered now, like the one is here. But we try to respect and to understand the circulation zones and the perspectives that Vandevelde had in mind already. When you look at all these small little dots, these are the pillars. So you notice how rational the whole building is. And you also notice that at some places they are closer to each other than at other places. For example, here, you notice there's a smaller distance. So this was a circulation zone. And and this also. And here you also have one. So when putting the shelves and so on and furniture again, organize it in the space given, we decided to free these perspectives so that you could have an impression again of what Vandevelde had in mind when he said that beauty comes from clarity. And we respected the simple, straightforward lines and the transparency of the building. Yes, I wrote here, note playground. Yes, when I say respect for heritage, this playground in a courtyard, in fact, was still, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, was in fact a parking lot. People just drove their car here inside and had a cheap parking lot in the middle of the city center. And in fact, it was terrible because here you had the cafe, and in summer you had people sitting outside here, very small children playing, families, and you had cars being parked here, which was also dangerous for children playing. So some years ago, we also decided not to use this very nice oasis, in fact, in the middle of the city anymore as a parking lot, but as a function where it was designed for. It was a playground, and it's now again a playground. So in this way, we also respect the heritage. Yes, also an important element was the color palette. I didn't tell you, but in fact, this is still a picture of the first renovation. You see the gray floor, which was everywhere in the library, and the yellow walls. In fact, when we were talking about redecorating the building, we hoped we could choose for a white wall, a white paint instead of the yellow, because just looking the whole day at a yellow wall makes you crazy, or nearly crazy. So we wanted white walls, but the preservation team didn't allow it, so we had to stick to the yellow walls, to the original color palette. But we could choose a new floor, and to choose the color of the floor, we had a look at the building because it was rather difficult to find a matching color. We looked at the terracotta walls, we looked at the pictures of the building as it was, and we saw these terracotta tiles. They were still present in some places, or they were restored in some places, but this was in fact the original color. So we made a choice for a terracotta linoleum floor. We didn't choose any stone floor, of course, because it would be terrible for the noise. It's a large open space, so when you have a stone floor, all these people, no textile or carpets, it wouldn't be nice to live there, to work there, because there's too much sound and noise. So we chose for a terracotta floor, and we kept the yellow walls, the Vandevelde yellow walls, and of course the mint tiles in the corridor. We also stuck to the industrial elements. And then we had the furniture, chairs, armchairs, sofas, closets, and so on. For the chairs, we wanted something that referred to school life, but also something that referred to Vandevelde. And then our architect had this suggestion. It was the Prouvé chair. It refers in its form to school chairs, but also to this arts and crafts movement, to craftsmanship in the combination of wood and metal. And when we looked at the moment it was created or designed, it dated from 1937, this design. So exact the same time as the period the school was built. So we thought this would be an excellent choice for our library. When we were asking for color samples, they told us you had different materials you could choose for wooden seats, but also for plastic seats, which was not too bad for us, because in the children's department, well, it was better to get something which could be easily cleaned and so on. So we took the wooden and the plastic chairs, and when we looked at the color samples, to our surprise, the color of the chairs, the color palette was completely the same as that of our building. So we saw again the soft yellow white, we saw the mint green and the terracotta, and then dark brown and black. So we decided to take these chairs. And furthermore, when we look at the armchairs and the rest of the sofas and so on, you see them here. At the time of Vandevelde, he himself, yes, I still forgot to show you, but these are original plans, designs for furniture for the school by Vandevelde. And when we looked at the plans he made, he drew some tubular chairs, very straight lines, and we tried to find furniture that fitted in this style. So you also have this industrial style, very simple lines, respecting the original style used and planned by Vandevelde. Another element was customer comfort, as I already mentioned, innovation and modern techniques. We chose for a repositioning of the welcome desk. Before it was at the back, so when people entered, they first were standing there and saying, "Oh, such a big space. Where can I go to? What is this?" Well, we had kind of a pilot project with a kind of test case where we put the desk more to the front of the space, very close to the entrance, and it worked better because people immediately went to it. You see here the raised platform. So this is the former welcome desk, which was one straight line, and further at the back you had a raised platform. We removed it because it was not accessible for people in a wheelchair, or difficult accessible, and it was also difficult accessible for older people. So we took it away so that all kinds of people could easily come to the welcome desk. You also notice there are two different heights, so people in a wheelchair can talk to the staff here, and other people can just stand here. Yes, because of Corona, you have these plexi screens, of course. They will be taken away when all this is behind us. Then we also replaced return terminals. They are now in the hall, in the entrance hall, by repositioning the front door of our library, but this is easier to explain when you're visiting us, so I'll gladly explain it to you then. We had a collab with the architectural department of the University of Leuven, a project around inclusive design, a project called Inclusive Design, where we had some focus groups, some visits of diverse users, diverse possible users, to experience what a library was like and to find out what was missing. So you had people with autism, people in a wheelchair, very young children, older people, people with concentration problems, vision impaired people. A diverse group visited the library, and they made a report, and we're still working on it. One of the conclusions was that, for example, this table where you have a computer where you can work, now there is only one here, but in better times, when more people are coming, there are more computers here and people sit next to another to work or to study. But for example, people who have autism find it terrible to sit at such a place. They are much more comfortable in these kind of seats where nobody can, where they are kind of protected and they don't have too much stimuli. Of course, we also included new techniques like what we call digipunt, where we have a number of computers where you can go on the internet, send mails, complete forms for administration and so on, where you can get some help. It is integrated in the library now because these people often need help, and formerly it was in a space in the hallway which was less efficient and less comfortable for people. We had also some multimedia desk here, so it's a special table with 4 computers where people can read online magazine, because we don't only have physical books, but of course lots of our collection is now digital, and you have to give it some room because otherwise it's not feasible. So people can sit here and read digital magazines in the library. Another element of customer comfort I already mentioned was sound reduction, noise reduction. Here you see the sound absorbing panels that we installed above the welcome desk, because this is really necessary. And we also had a relocation of the new book sorting unit, which still is much more quieter than the previous one, but still produces some noise. And in the former situation, it was situated very close to the welcome desk, which was not very comfortable if you wanted to ask something, and now it has been relocated. And then we recently, only 1 or 2 weeks ago, we opened, well, 1 week ago, we opened a streaming studio, Henry. We have an auditorium in the building with a stage where you can have gigs and so on, or lectures. And we have now worked together, a collaboration with a number of social cultural partners, but also with Leuven Mindgate, known for its innovative ideas. And they all invested in this streaming studio where you can at the same time have people in the studio, people at home, and you can watch it there at the screens or when you are present in the studio. It's just started, and I'm very curious about how this will turn out and what will happen next, because it's not only a technical trick, it's also a project of working together with local partners and making something better for our audience. Okay, after all this renovation, there's also the wayfinding that has to be adapted, and also in the wayfinding, which is a process going on now. We try to be true and to stick to the original plans and ideas of Vandevelde. So when we are looking for names for different spaces, the common spaces in the building, we thought it would be nice to reuse names, original names on the plans of Vandevelde. And that's what we're planning to do. So we work together with a commercial partner, Meixenaar, and they are now, they got a list of names. One of them is here, Secretary. It's not possible to use the name at the original place, but the fact that we can reuse the name in itself is, of course, nice, and is also showing our respect for Vandevelde. Meixenaar, the firm that is creating and taking care of the wayfinding, also decided to use the pillars as much as possible for signaling, so as to avoid having still some extra signaling and extra elements in the space. We want to keep it clear and simple. And then there's also the materials, that's the material that's being used for the signaling for the wayfinding. We chose for cardboard, which is maybe a strange choice, but when you're working in a building where you have lots of books and where there is an archive, it's logical that you do something with the material paper or cardboard, and that's why we chose this for the signaling. It also refers to the arts and craftsmanship that Vandevelde was so much fan of. And of course, we are reinforcing the cardboard with a steel frame so that it's sturdy enough to be in a public place. But it seems, well, we're looking forward to see it. We already have a test panel in the corridor, but we hope that this year this will get finished. It's also a climate-friendly renovation. We recycled the wooden floors, the raised platform I showed you some moments ago, and the wooden desk, the wooden welcome desk was recycled. The shelves were used for DVDs, to put the DVDs on. We recycled the old book sorting unit because it went to a technical school that thought it was interesting for the students to have a look at it and to work with it. The security gates were brought with the other library branches in the neighborhood. The floor is linoleum, so we chose for a natural material. We have now LED lighting, and it's computer controlled, so when it's functioning automatically, so when you're passing by, the lights go on when it's necessary. We also have energy saving lamps and sun panels. And then of course there is the social sustainability. It's always important to mean something to the local community when you want to reuse heritage buildings. So the renovation project was for our library a real team project. Everybody took his role in it. The people who bought the books, the people from the logistics and so on. So it was something that brought us together. And then it was also a project that brought together various city departments. There was a collaboration with Groendienst, so the people taking care of plants in the city. They offered to supply us with green plants. The study department of the buildings was of course making the studies. The architect of the city of Leuven drew the plans for the new organization of the space, for the relighting and so on. You had the IT department, the technical department, the city archive, the heritage cell. They all worked together to realize this renovation. And then we worked also together with other local partners like the Leuven University, the Department of Architecture. We had the social cultural partners, social workplaces, the technical schools, and so on. I see I'm still within time, but I'm going to hurry up. Audience engagement and communication, built heritage. What did we do to put it, to make this building known to the public, in fact, because many people in Leuven even don't know the building. They know the library, but they don't know it's a Vandevelde building. Already in 2015, we organized a reunion of people with the name, the last name Vandevelde, and they came together in our building to celebrate 50 years of library in the Vandevelde building. We designed a library game around Vandevelde for youngsters. There was an exhibition about Bauhaus and a call for stories and pics about a school, the technical school. And this is still an important project running on now with the Heritage Cell and the City Archive. We're collecting the stories about school life because the school closed in 1983. So people working there, students going there are rather old now, and we want to collect all the material to register it and to do something with it. Maybe we return it to the building, and maybe we can make an audio tour or something, because at the moment there are interviews with ex-students and ex-teachers of the school, and we hope to use this material maybe in an audio tour. We hope to reuse their photographs in information panels in the central entrance hall. These are all plans that are still to come. We had a booklet about renovation, drone video, and professional architectural pics. In this way, we had some merchandising, like the calendar 2022. Each year we make and we provide a library calendar for our customers, for our visitors, a free calendar. And this year we chose not to put any poems on it, but to put the building as a central element, because it's 80 years ago that the school was used and started to be used in Leuven. We have collabs with Visit Leuven, the tourism agency, with city guides who give a tour for tourists and locals. We have guided tours for students architecture that we do ourselves. We have contacts with influencers like tourist modernist, and we organize events like Heritage and Open Monument Days. We hope to have a new creation of the Rosas Dans Rosas choreography in November as a kind of celebration here in our library of the reopening of the library in the new form, because this was postponed because of Corona. We are welcoming local photographers and film directors, of course, because they like this building as a film set. And we have many other plans, but I quickly go on. I'm working at the library. It's the biggest, well, it's taking most of the place of the building together with the city archive. And I think also the fact that we are a library is an important element to make this building sustainable, because nowadays a library is not anymore a place where you just store books. It's what they call a third space. It's a third space for all. People have the first space, that's their home. The second space, that's the place where they work. But then they need a third space, a public space, where they can come together, where they can learn, where they can meet, where they can relax. And when you look at a library, it's one of the few cultural places where you can just come for free. You don't have to pay anything. You can just enter the place and sit there and relax, read some books, a magazine. You don't have to buy a drink to stay there. So libraries play an important role in bringing people together.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, Anne, to interrupt you, but I noticed we're 11:10 now.
Yep.
So when we want to have some time for 2 or 3 small questions, we really have to stop, I think. But it was an impressive talk. But I have to ask the audience if there are any questions, which they have now the opportunity to ask. No, it was all very clear.
Okay.
What was remarkable to me is there are so many stories in this project.
Yes.
It's really a treasure to work with. And that was something which was to me quite remarkable. How also how the future in this case as a perfect match with the past, even the very past. And you talked yourself about this this creative and cultural hub in the city since the very beginning. So in fact, I think I had the opportunity, of course, as being a citizen of Leuven to visit it, but I think it made us all very curious. Maybe one slight question is more historical. You said the building was opened, or the school was opened in the middle of the war, in fact, 1942. I was wondering, as this was a brand new building when the war started, two questions: was there no damaging during the war? One question. And the other one, was there never interest from the German occupier or even the Allies to use the building? But maybe it's too
I'm not
much
a
asked.
historian, so I can't
Yeah.
answer the question, but I will ask people of the archives who can maybe help me in answering the question, because I really don't know whether the building was kind of destroyed. I have to add that, in fact, the official opening was in 1942, but they told me that already in 1940, unofficially, the school was being used, but officially it was opened in 1942. I didn't hear anything about damage, war damage, but I should check.
Oh, it's maybe okay. Elaine, your hands are up. Elaine. Yeah. Your micro.
Is it better?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, sorry. I just had a small question because I'm involved in a reading project in our school, and I teach myself, of course. And I always find it very difficult to convince my students to go to a library. You can see that there's lots of programs that promote young children below the age of 12 to go to the library and do all kinds of library projects and so on. But I was giving a speech last week at the Kanon Cultuurdag for a number of librarians, and they also complained about the fact that you cannot get youngsters, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, to a library anymore. And I was wondering, do you focus on that target group with certain actions or not?
Yes, we had a game about Vandevelde, which was in fact a library game, and which contained some tasks and assignments to discover the library, and it was meant for secondary education. We also worked together with Class, where we had some reading sessions together around actual subjects. And you can always ask us to visit the library and to learn how to work. We also had a program with, we worked together with another school where pupils read books at home, and then they presented their favorite books in the library. And they also decorated it, so they had their own book stand in the library, which made them very proud. So these are different ways to work with youngsters in the library. And what we also see nowadays is that youngsters, even secondary school students, come to study here. So they want to be like university students. And on Wednesday afternoon or Friday or in the weekends, they come to study here. And in this way, they also learn to know the library.
Yeah, I noticed it's very striking that our students visit the Bauhaus in Weimar, but I think some of them have never visited the library in Leuven.
Yeah, always welcome.
We will come. We will come. Thank you.
Ria, we don't hear you.
Fortunately, we have to finish this talk. I want to do this by thanking you very, very much, Anne, to share this very interesting project with us. Hope to see you in April. If it would be possible to share your presentation in PDF for our partners, that would be very nice. For the audience, I hope to meet you next minute already for our next talk. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.